Hey guys, welcome back to Dreamland. Here's another part of the series. In the last part, we saw Wangji drawing, so let's find out what really happened to him. Let's begin. To his surprise, sleep found him quickly, exhaustion winning over turmoil, but it didn't last. Moments later, Wangji jolted awake, gasping. His body soaked into icy awareness as though someone had thrown him into cold water. Dad, save me. Please save us. He murmured in half sleep, trembling, still trapped between dream and reality. But when his eyes blinked open, everything was wrong. He wasn't home, he wasn't drawing, and yet he was drenched, soaked to the bone. Blinking away the blur, he turned his head and froze. On his left stood Wing, holding an empty jug, a sharp glare in his eyes, and a smug, satisfied smirk curving his lips. Then everything fell into place. It wasn't a dream. It was Wing who had thrown the water on him. But why? Wing's smirk widened at the sight of him. He had been driving aimlessly for hours, trying to calm the storm inside him, only to return and find this man, this unwanted husband, sleeping peacefully on his side, who gave him permission to touch anything in this room, let alone lie there like he belonged. Wing hated when people touched things. Sharing a room was already unbearable. Sharing a bed was unthinkable. Had he not made that perfectly clear earlier? Still, he had to admit the satisfaction that bloomed in his chest as he poured that cold water over Wangji's face was almost sweet. Watching the man flinch, gasping for air like he was drawing, had reached something cruel and restless in him. Even now, minutes later, Wangji still sat there, shivering, lips parted, staring at him with eyes that accused and a face that burned from shock. Wing tilted his head, voiceless with venom. Who gave you permission to sleep here? Just because I said enjoy the luxury doesn't mean you can touch whatever you want. Stay away from my things and from me. Then that ugly smirk returned. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it dripped mockery. I didn't know you were that desperate to share a bed with me. But guess what? He pinched one of Wang's wet bangs where it clung to his cheek. I'll pass. Water droplets slid down Wang's face, tracing his jaw, catching the faint moonlight from the balcony. His cheeks flushed a deep, helpless red, anger, humiliation, hurt, all tangled into one. Wings smirk only dependent. For the first time in his life, Wangji wanted to punch someone hard just to wipe that look off Wing's face. Wing straightened, adding in a low, cold tone, now get off my bed before I drag you out myself. Something in Wangji's eyes shifted, his expression calm but colder than the water dripping from his chin. Without a word, he rose, grabbed his phone from the bedside table, and walked over the balcony. He didn't look at Wing, didn't speak, didn't even spare him a glance, as though he wasn't worth seeing. Wing blinked, momentarily thrown off. How could he just walk away like that? No yelling, no defending himself, no reaction at all. What this his way of mocking me? Of saying my anger wasn't even worth his words? Or worse, was this another one of his tricks to draw attention? And why? Why was I even thinking about that, instead of enjoying my victory? Wing muttered under his breath. Must be one of his tricks. Either way, it didn't matter. Let him have his fake pride. He'd already invaded the room. I wouldn't let him invade my thoughts too. He cast one last glance toward the balcony where moonlight spilled across the floor. Then he pulled back the covers, shoved the damp sheet aside, and lay down on the dry edge of the bed. Sleep came slow, bitter, and restless. Next morning, Wing woke earlier than he liked, the soft rustling in the room breaking his sleep. Blinking away the heaviness from his eyes, he saw Wangji already dressed, sitting on the sofa trying his shoes with calm precision. His luggage rested neatly nearby, and beside it a slim side bag, something that looked like it held a laptop. Without a word, Wangji gathered his things and left the room. Wing scoffed under his breath. What weak company does he own that he needs to rush there this early? He muttered, rolling his eyes. But irony wasn't lost on him. He was the one with the actual CO tag. With a sigh, he got up, dragged himself to the washroom, and soon joined his mother for breakfast. Madame Liu looked up as he sat down, her tone light but teasing. So, how was your wedding night, son? You look like someone who didn't get much sleep. Wing gave her a blank stare and shook his head. Oh, maybe you're not comfortable sharing such things with me, she said with a mock sweetness that only irritated him further. Don't pretend like you don't know anything about my wedding situation, he snapped, glaring at her. Madame Liu only smiled unbothered. I know, son, but I also know people change after marriage. Just checking. Well, I'm not, he shot back flatly. As the servants began to serve breakfast, Wing noticed something off. Where is he? He asked, glancing around the dining room. One of the maids, the same who had opened the door for Wangji, stepped forward. Sir, he already left for somewhere. I asked him to have breakfast, but he refused it. Wing gave a small nod to dismiss her and silently began eating, though his mind felt oddly restless. Madame Liu, however, didn't miss a thing. Her eyes lingered on her son with quiet sufficient until he finally looked up and sighed. Mom, please don't start again. I was just curious, that's all. Now let me eat in peace. I already have enough to think about. Later, Wing was about to leave for an important meeting with his secretary, Jiang Cheng, when Xia barged in, like always grabbing both their attention. Before she could start one of her famous tantrums, Wing groaned, Not now, Xia, we're in a hurry. Xia ignored him completely and turned to Jiang Cheng. You can go back to your desk. I'll be going with Wing. Wing blinked, confused. What's going on in her mind now? Meanwhile, Jiang Cheng silently cursed his luck. Great. Just when he's finally in a good mood, she shows up. When he's in a bad mood, and I beg her to help, she vanishes. Wing tried again. Look, Xia, it's an important deal. I need my secretary here. I told you. She said smoothly to Jiang Cheng, still ignoring Wing. You can go to your desk and fetch me every detail about this deal. Jiang looked helplessly between them as Sia's glare and Wing's raged growth inside and left the cabin. Only after the door closed did Sia turn back to Wing, arms crossed. Now what are you waiting for? Aren't we in a hurry? Wing stared at her. What was that all about? Nothing, she said, smiling innocently. You said it's an important deal. I just want to be part of this meeting. You can't bring the whole office with you, can you? Don't worry, I'll do a better job than Jiang. No, come on, we don't want to be late. In the car, silence hung heavy. Wayne drove with his usual calm focus, while Sia fidgeted beside him, mustering the courage to ask about his marriage. Something she had been dying to know ever since he came back from his wedding looking different. Finally, she blurted, you should have invited our whole group to your wedding. Wing only raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. She continued, forcing a light laugh. It would have been a good chance to get everyone together again. You know how they always find excuses not to show up? I was actually trying to make them come, but you got married so suddenly no one had enough time. Wing finally glanced her way. Don't tell me you told all our friends I was getting married. She grinned proudly. Of course I did. That's what I was trying to tell you. Wing sighed. Why? Because it's your wedding and your friends deserve to be a part of it too. She replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. No, he said calmly, trying not to sound annoyed. I neither wanted this wedding nor them at it. Her smile faltered. I didn't know you weren't happy about the marriage, she said softly. Wing scoffed. Did I ever sound excited about it? She shook her head quickly. No, she thought, you never did. But her heart skipped at the thought. That's what she really wanted to hear from him. She still had a chance. Maybe she could make him realize no one was better for him than her. Still, one thing caught at her curiosity, and she knew she wouldn't get another chance to ask. Well, it's your fault, she began lightly. First, you never said anything, and second, the way you were looking at him when he walked down the aisle, no one would believe it was just a marriage of convenience. Wink had snapped toward her. What way? Like you'd never seen anything like him before, she teased, like you couldn't take your eyes off him. For a moment, Wing said nothing. His mind drifted to that moment. Wang's calm face, his quiet grace. People really got the wrong idea, he thought. But his beauty was undeniable. Then last night flashed before him, those warm eyes turning cold. The instant he spoke, Sia's voice snapped him back. Come back to Earth, Wing. Where were you lost? Nothing, he said quickly. And you misunderstood. I was just thinking how all devils manage to look like angels sometimes. Sia's heart sank, so he did find Wangji handsome. She forced a bright smile. And you kissed him too, on the lips, right? Wing clenched his jaw, holding back irritation. He didn't want to snap at her, but why was he so interested in his marriage? Hadn't he made it clear he hadn't wanted this? You know, Sia, he said, his voice even but tired. I'd really appreciate it if we could end this conversation. I don't want to talk about him right now. She muttered in a dull voice. I was just saying you could have saved that kiss for your love. Wing gave her an amused look. Flustered, she added. I mean, some people avoid it out of shyness. You could have done that too. Wing chuckled softly. Despite himself, he reached out and ruffled her hair. You're impossible. Sia sweated his hand away, scowling and checking herself inside mirror. You ruined my hair. Do you know how long it took me to make it look like this? No, he replied casually. But just for the record, I didn't kiss him, I just pretended to. He didn't look her way, so he missed the way her face lit up. Her smile stretching ear to ear at those words. Meanwhile, Wangji did everything he could to stay away from being from the mansion, from all of it. He usually never came to his studio this early, but that was going to change, at least for a while. He had even spent an hour at the park before heading there, just to kill time. That morning when he came downstairs, Madame Liu was already seated on the couch in the living room, leisurely sipping her tea. He hesitated. It would be rude to leave without greeting her, he thought. So gathering his composure, he approached and said quietly, Good morning. He wasn't sure whether to call her mom, so he didn't. Madame Louis looked up at him with a faint squeal but said nothing. I didn't see you last night, Wangji tried. He turned polite. So I thought you might be tired. I didn't want to disturb you. Her skull shifted into a bored expression. There was no warmth in her eyes, only a measured disinterest. Still, he continued. I just wanted to inform you that I'm going to my studio. It might get late when I return. Did I ask you? She said casually, setting her cup down with a soft clink. Wangji blinked, caught off guard. No, he murmured. She leaned back with a faint scoff. Listen, where you go, when you leave, when you come, or don't come back, I have no interest in keeping track of it. And one more thing. Her gaze hardened. I know how you people tricked my son into this marriage, so don't expect me to throw you a welcome party. Wangji lowered his eyes, nodded slightly, and didn't stay a moment longer. On his way out, one of the maids asked gently if he wanted breakfast, but he declined with a small polite smile. Talking to Madame Liu had already proven a waste of breath. He'd only greeted her because she was an elder. At least now he knew exactly whom Wing took after. By the time evening came, Wangji's body ached from overwork. He had poured everything into dance practice, partly to distract himself, partly to avoid being alone with Xianwang. who would have definitely bombarded him with questions about the wedding. So far, his plan was working. He had spent the entire day running on 2 cups of ramen and sheer willpower. Now, sitting on the edge of the practice room floor, sweat damp hair is sticking to his forehead, he felt the heavy pull of fatigue and longing. He missed home. He missed his father's quiet presence, the warmth that a small house always carried. He hadn't gone to see him yet, but he had called earlier, his voice steady, assuring his father that everything was fine. Everything was fine, even it wasn't. Later, when Wayne got home and went upstairs to freshen up, he noticed Wangji was nowhere to be seen. It meant he hadn't returned yet. After having dinner and spending 2 more hours working home, Wing finally went to bed, only to realize with some surprise that Wangji was still not back. A flicker of irritation rose in him. What could he possibly be so busy with at this hour? Did he always spend his days like this, wandering around, doing nothing meaningful? His father must have spoiled him beyond repair. At an age where a man should be building his career, Wangji was wasting time doing God knows what. Then again, why would he worry about his future when he had already found an easier way to settle down? But this house wasn't his playground. He couldn't act like a pampered child leaving at dawn, coming home in the middle of the night without telling anyone. If he was going to live here, he needed to learn how to follow rules. The next 3 days passed in a strange silence. Wing barely caught a glimpse of him, not at breakfast, not in the evening. It was as if Wangji didn't live there at all. If not for his luggage still sitting by the sofa or the faint traces of water on the bathroom floor each morning, Wing might have believed he'd left entirely. He didn't touch anything that belonged to Wing. He didn't move anything in the room. The only sign of his presence was the sofa, a small, quiet proof that he still came home. Wing didn't understand it. His mom had told him that this man would probably do anything to win him over, act polite, flattering, desperate for approval. But this wasn't that. Wangji barely looked at him, didn't speak to him, didn't even seem to acknowledge that he existed. It was almost deliberate, the way he ignored him completely, as if Wing's presence itself was an inconvenience. Until tonight. Wangji had always made it home before midnight, but this time exhaustion caught up to him. He'd closed his eyes for what felt like a minute at his studio and accidentally fell asleep. When he woke, it was already past midnight. He sat up instantly, heart skipping. If anyone saw him here in the morning, they'd assume he'd spent the night in the studio. He couldn't let that happen. Panicking, he gathered his things and hurried toward Vivenson. But the streets were empty, no taxis in sight. He ended up walking the whole way, the night air cold against his skin. By the time he arrived, his legs ached, and the main gate was locked. He froze. He hadn't known there was a password. He'd never needed it before. In the morning, it was already open, and at night, he'd always returned before it was shut. Now there was no way in. Wangji sighed quietly, the weight of fatigue pressing down harder. There was a large flat stone near the gate. He sat on it, resting his back beside him. The night was still. Only the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of passing cars kept him company. He would wait. Next morning, Wing was fuming with anger when one of the house guards informed him early that they'd found Wangji sleeping outside the gate. He instantly assumed Wangji had spent the whole night out partying, returned only at dawn. But when he went there himself, what he saw only made him angrier. Wangji sleeping soundly like someone without a care in the world. Anger whirled in Wing's chest. He grabbed Wangji by the arm and pulled him up so harshly that Wangji woke instantly startled. Wing didn't say a word until he dragged him inside the house, and Wangji was too shocked and tired to resist. When they reached the hallway, Wing let go of him so forcefully that Wangji almost stumbled to the floor. Where were you the whole night? Wing half held, half demanded. Wangji could feel a dull ache spreading through his head. His migraine was coming. His whole body ached from sleeping in that position. His legs were sore, his shoulders stiff. He didn't want to stand anymore, he just needed to lie down. Hearing Wing's raised voice, Madame Liu and a familiar maid came rushing in. What happened? Madame Liu asked. Wing replied, his tone dripping with mockery. Yesterday he was out the whole night partying. One of our guards found him sleeping outside in this state. He turned toward Wangji again, who truly didn't look well. His face was pale and exhausted, and he could barely stand without swaying. Seeing him like that should have softened Wing's anger, but it only deepened the confusion inside him. In a lower tone this time, he asked, I'm asking you something. Where were you last night? But it was like Wangji didn't even hear him. Without a word, he started walking toward the staircase, limping slightly. The limp made something tighten in Wing's chest, an uneasy feeling he couldn't name. As Wangji was about to pass him, Bing grabbed his wrist. Don't make me repeat it. Just answer the damn question. Wangji didn't look at him. His gaze dropped to the hand holding his. Seeing that, Wing's grip only tightened. Wangji could have answered if he had been asked properly, but no, Wing had already decided the answer on his own. That he'd been partying, and Wangji didn't explain himself to people who refused to listen. Meeting Wing's eyes, Wangji summoned what little strength he had left and freed his hand in one swift motion. Then, to everyone's surprise, he turned not to Wing but to the maid. Did you lock the door yesterday? He asked, his voice calm and steady as if nothing had happened. The maid froze, clearly startled, but his composed tone steadied her. Yes, she replied. I didn't know you hadn't returned it. Madame Liu told me to lock it, so I did. Wangji turned his eyes briefly toward Madame Liu before saying to the maid, I was only a few minutes late last night, but when I came back, the gate was already locked. Next time, check before you close it, or better tell me the password. And if I'll be out late, I'll inform you beforehand. The maid bowed slightly, still nervous. It won't happen again, sir. Wangji gave her a small nod and walked upstairs, leaving behind a stunned silence. Wing was fuming again. He can talk this politely to her, but not to him. And worse, the maid was acting like she worked for him. Madame Leo's voice broke his thoughts. Did you see that? Wing muttered, like I was blind. Madame Leo continued sharply. He glared at me like he owns this house and we are the outsiders. And you? She turned to the maid. Don't forget who you work for. The maid flinched, but before Madame Leo could scold her more, Wing intervened. Mom, she didn't do anything wrong. He said, then turned to maid. You can go. When the maid left, Madame Leo faced her son again. And what was that? What? Bing asked, defensive. She gave him a knowing look. Why do you care so much where he was last night? Wing snapped, his voice rising again. So what? Let him be, let him come and go whenever he wants. Like this is some damn hotel. He can enter or leave as he pleases. No one's even allowed to question his actions. He doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Not for his sore muscles, not for his limb, not for anything. He just walks around like he owns the house. Madame Liu blinked at his sudden outburst, then sighed softly. She made him sit on the nearby couch and began rubbing his head gently. Relax, she said in a calm tone. You're right, but we know what kind of person he is. Wild, hard to control. You saw how he behaved. If his father doesn't mind how he was raised, then why should we try to change him? And even if we do, it won't work. She paused, lowering her voice. Don't let yourself be bothered by his actions. The Wing agreed with her words, his pride didn't rest. Deep down, he had already made up his mind. Wangji might have escaped his questions today, but next time, just one mistake, and Wing wouldn't let it slide so easily. Not again.
Later, when Bing arrived at his office, his mood could sour milk, and the poor soul who had to deal with it, none other than his long-suffering secretary, Jiang Cheng. Jiang Cheng was doing everything humanly possible to keep the peace, moving quietly, answering softly, basically walking on eggshells, wearing socks. It was time for Bing's usual coffee break, and Jiang Cheng couldn't help but wonder why she always chose the worst day to act stubborn. If she just went here, he thought miserably. She could have distracted the boss and rescued him. Wing took one sip of his coffee and immediately spat it out. He slammed the cup down on the desk, glaring daggers. Do you call this coffee? He snapped. It's so bitter no one could drink it. Make another one. And this time be careful if you want to keep your job. Jiang Cheng stood there in silence, fighting every urge to roll his eyes. How could he explain to this man that it wasn't the coffee that was bitter? It was him. He sighed, trudging toward the machine, mumbling under his breath. It's fate, he thought gloomily. Either the coffee turns out right by miracle, or I die trying. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, a familiar voice rang from behind, sharp, confident, and with the kind of tone that could freeze him mid-step. He turned, and there was Sia, arms crossed, blocking his way. Where are you going? She asked, narrowing her eyes. It's Wayne Coffee, right? So go give it to him. To find you, Jiang Cheng replied with a sly smile. Me? Why? She asked suspiciously. Because Sir said he doesn't want this coffee. He paused dramatically. He wants you to make a fresh cup for him. So I was just coming to tell you. Oh, she grinned. So that's why you were sulking. Yes, Jiang Cheng admitted, pretending to pout. I didn't like it. No one makes sweeter coffee than me. Sia scoffed, brushing past him. We'll see about that. And she strode toward the cafeteria, her ponytail swinging like a flag of victory. The moment she was gone, Jiang Cheng let out a long sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, he muttered under his breath. Finally, I've learned how to trick her. Then, with a smirk, he added softly, enjoy, boss, enjoy her company. Wangji arrived at the studio after resting a few hours at the mansion. He hadn't wanted to get up, yet he also needed to clear his mind. Something impossible if he stayed cooped up there. So he came. He kept himself busy watching a group of teenagers practicing just as he had taught them, letting their energy distract him. Suddenly, Sayang appeared, his expression serious. Can we have a word? He asked. Wangji tensed but tried to hide it. So, what is it? He replied. Sayang cast a glance at the kids practicing nearby. Not here. Wangji hesitated, denying him would only make Sayang more suspicious, so he agreed. Once inside Sayang's cabin, Wangji asked, what's the matter? Sayang let out a long sigh. That's exactly what I'm thinking. What's the matter? Did I do something to upset you? You've been ignoring me every chance you get. Wangji opened his mouth to protest, but Sayan cut him off. Don't even try to deny it. Nothing will convince me otherwise. Cornered Wangji admitted. Yes, I was ignoring you. Sayan sighed dependent. What why? To save myself from your stupid questions about what happened after the wedding, about how I spent my way. Wangji stopped himself. He was speaking the truth, only twisting the meaning behind his words. But Sayang looked convinced. Shaking his head, Sayang said, exasperated but firm, what am I going to do with you? Then mischievously, by the way, you know me so well. I was dying to ask you those things. He softened immediately. But I know you too, Wangji. I would never force you to say anything you don't want to. You can always rely on me. It was those words, so calm, so understanding, that made Wangji act on impulse. He hugged Sayang tightly. Sayang froze, eyes wide, as if they might pop out of his head. Wangji, do I need to take you to the hospital? He stammered. Shut up, Wangji whispered. Before the moment could deepen, a surprised voice rang out. What are you two doing here? They broke apart, startled to find Susie glaring at them suspiciously. Xianwang hesitantly stepped back. Nothing, we're just having a serious discussion, he said nervously. Susie raised an eyebrow while hugging each other. Xianwang froze. Yes, Wangji answered smoothly, immediately changing the subject. You're late today. Let's not waste time. So she wasn't convinced something suspicious wasn't going on between them. But she didn't press further. She followed Wangji, and after a few steps, she turned to Soyoung, gesturing with a dark glare. I'm watching you. Soyoung muttered under his breath, psycho. Then smirked. Just wait until you meet Wangji's husband. Soyoung froze, suddenly realizing he hadn't asked the thing that truly mattered. How Wing had been with him, how his married life was going, and most importantly, why Wangji looked so pale that age, almost not himself. Was he struggling to adapt his new life? It was the one thing Soyoung disliked about Wangji. He kept his problems to himself, as if sharing them somehow made them heavier. Another week passed, and nothing really changed in Wing's and Wangji's lives. They were slowly adjusting to this new rhythm. Wangji still left as early as he woke and returned late at night. The door was no longer locked, and whether he came early or late by a few minutes, it didn't matter. This morning, however, Wing found himself in an unusual situation. His driver insisted on taking him to the office. Usually Wing preferred to drive himself, but with Madame Liu cancelling her outing and Mr. Wee's hospital visits keeping him busy, he agreed. He planned to go through emails on the way. Suddenly the car stopped. What happened? Why did you stop? Wing asked without even looking up. The driver hesitated. Sir, I think we can't drive any further until. Wing looked ahead. A bus had stopped at a stand. A large crowd gathered around, discussing God knows what. These people argue anywhere without thinking. Somebody has to actually do their job, and they face trouble because of their stupidity. Wing muttered. The driver added, No, sir, I think someone's injured. Wing's eyes narrowed. Wing's eyes narrowed. Then why are they just standing there talking? Shouldn't they help him and clear the street for others? Nowadays, who wants to help a stranger, sir? The driver replied. Wing's patience snapped. Go check what's happening. The driver nodded and struggled to push through the crowd. But Wing couldn't just sit. He had somewhere important to be on time. He left the car and pushed his way through, commanding a path with his presence. And then he saw him. Unconscious, lying in the middle of the street, was no one else but his so-called husband, Wangji. Before he could step closer, someone grabbed his hand. So don't touch him. We don't know what happened. What if his condition worsens and his family blames you? Leave him to fate. Wing's blood boiled. He wrenched his hand free and grabbed the man's collar, tightening his grip so sharply it was almost choking him. Instead of helping him, you're standing there enjoying his condition and daring to stop others who might. What if it were you lying there and no one wanted to touch you? The man beside him coughed violently and staggered back. I think he's gone. Wang ignored him and went straight to Wangji, lifting him effortlessly in a bridal carry. The driver quickly opened the car door and Wang carefully seated Wangji in the back seat. The crowd stared, stunned. They hadn't accepted the seemingly ordinary man lying there to belong to a rich family. Some silently regretted not helping sooner. Wing climbed in beside him because Wangji was lying down. Wing rested Wangji's head on his lap, giving himself room, and instructed the driver to head to the nearest hospital. He studied Wangji closely, pale, pulse slightly slower than normal, and noticeably thinner. Even though it was his first time carrying him like this, Wing could tell just how much weight Wangji had lost in the past few weeks. Then he noticed a small cut on Wangji's right cheek. He carefully took out his handkerchief, turned Wangji's face slightly to the left, and gently cleaned the dirt around the wound. After that day, they rarely saw each other outside of passing moments. If Wings noticed Wangji rushing in the morning, or if Wangji returned while Wing was still upset in bulk, Wing never bothered to question his late night absence again. He no longer bothered himself wondering where Wangji had been or what he was doing so late. To him, Wangji always looked so innocent until his eyes closed. The moment they opened, that same sharp glare would land on Wing. Okay, guys, that's where today's story ends. Until next time, keep dreaming with us in Dreamland. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for the next part.